What if Breaking Bad and The Walking Dead were connected? And now, throughout The Walking Dead, there have been hints and teases towards a connection to Breaking Bad. And of course, Better Call Saul kind of does throw a whole wrench in the theory because of the timeline. But I thought it'd be fun to theorize and just come up with ideas of how Breaking Bad is connected to The Walking Dead and if it has a much greater meaning than just little nods and teases. So please stay tuned. And now, before we actually get into the video, I'd like to ask you all to like, share, and subscribe. And again, thank you guys so much for the growth. Thank you guys so much for the support. I really appreciate it. And I'd like to ask you all to like this video as much as you guys can. It helps a ton. But without further ado, let's get right into the video. And now, before I get into theories and just the video in general, I want to clarify that I know that there's a lot of loose ends to this theory, and I believe it's been disproven because of the spin-offs of The Walking Dead and also Better Call Saul in general. And this is more like fan fiction and more of a what if. So yeah, just going into the video, I wanted to clarify that. Now, first of all, I want to talk about the timeline. As we all know, Breaking Bad, in the show's universe, right, in the timeline of the show, Walter White starts his whole empire, right? He starts cooking in 2008. That's where the show starts, and he dies in 2010, specifically September 7th, 2010. And as we all know, the zombie apocalypse in The Walking Dead starts in 2010 as well. So how do these two connect? First of all, in season 2 of The Walking Dead, we do see Heisenberg's blue sky when Daryl pulls out Merle's medicine bag, and we do see Walter White's blue sky in that bag. And as we all know, that specific drug, I'm not going to say the name of it because of YouTube, it does not come in blue in the real world, right? That is a Breaking Bad thing, and that's just because of the purity of it and just the way that Heisenberg cooked up that drug. And as we all know, in Breaking Bad, Walter White's blue sky became so popular that it was going around the country and everybody was talking about it. And also you have Gustavo, who ran such a big distribution for these type of drugs that it is not a far-fetched theory that maybe somewhere Merle and Daryl got their hands on it as well. Of course, it was so popular and it was so pure that they would, of course, want to give it a try. And as we all know, Merle is a drug addict in The Walking Dead, and also Daryl is as well. I mean, they didn't fully allude to it, so we can't really say if he was or wasn't, but we could assume so. Let's just assume that Daryl was a drug addict as well back in the day. And of course, we could see that Merle got his hands on some blue sky and he's preserving it. And this is possibly after the death of Heisenberg, right? And of course, it would be after the death of Heisenberg, but specifically after Jesse Pinkman escaped. And let's just assume that Pinkman did not cook up any new drugs while he escaped. And as we all know, in the movie El Camino, the events of that movie happen fairly close to the finale of Breaking Bad. So yeah, I think that Merle would preserve this drug, and also on top of that, these two shows taking place in the same year. So the finale of Breaking Bad taking place in 2010, and also the starting of The Walking Dead taking place in 2010. I think that that would be the very last batch that Jesse Pinkman made. And this kind of does also allude to the origins of the Walkers, and of course with Daryl Dixon and Just World Beyond and all of these other spin-offs of The Walking Dead, we do have a little bit more of an understanding where could this virus have come from, right? And as we all know, in World Beyond, that post-credit scene does say that the Walkers were born here in France. So I wanted to come up with a what if theory, right? What if the blue sky drug created the Walker virus? And this goes back to Breaking Bad as well, because in Breaking Bad, when Jesse and Walter were working for Gustavo, there was a specific episode that highlighted contamination, right? And Walter was very strict on that rule. He wanted everything to stay clean so the product does not get contaminated. And of course, after Walter escapes, right after Hank's death, and when he's in hiding, Jesse is chained up and he's forced to cook for Jack's crew, who were also responsible for Hank's death. And now in this specific moment, right, if you want to connect The Walking Dead and Breaking Bad, I think that this is a very perfect way to do it. And what I'm talking about is that probably the blue sky got contaminated while Jesse was cooking for Jack's crew. And if we see his workspace, right, he's chained up, he has a big beard, he's dirty, and also it's a very dirty location in general. It's out in the open, it's not in any like air sealed room like how Gustavo's whole lab was. It is just out in the open. So it is very possible that somewhere down the line, right, this batch of blue sky, right, the very last batch of blue sky, which probably even Merle has his hands on, got contaminated by Jesse. And if you look at it in that way, you could see that maybe Jesse is the main antagonist of The Walking Dead. I mean, not really directly, but you could really see that, right? I mean, if you really look at it in that way, then maybe Walter is the main antagonist of The Walking Dead, because he's the one that created the blue sky, which of course got everybody buzzing around about it and all these members of gangs wanting to get their hands on it, and then which led into Jesse cooking it in very bad conditions, which probably got contaminated, where whoever did that drug later on, they got the Walker virus. And of course, as of today, we do not know what's the origin of the Walker virus. They could really make it anything else, right? They could say it's something from space, or they could just say it's some government experiment. But I like the idea of Walter White's blue sky being the origins of the Walkers, and that is solely because it got contaminated while Jesse was making the batch. And now I want to talk about another piece of evidence on how these two universes could be connected together. And during season 4 of The Walking Dead, we see Daryl and Beth talking, and Daryl is telling Beth a story about him and Merle meeting somebody for a drug pickup, and he describes this person as a skinny guy that is a tweaker, and that really well describes Jesse, right? And like just how he explains this person and his personality when Merle was talking bad about his kid's show, right? And of course, a lot of people in the comments are going to be like, Jesse does not have a child in Breaking Bad. And we could fully assume that this child is Brock. And so it totally makes sense because Brock's mother did die in Breaking Bad by Uncle Jack's crew. And maybe after the events of El Camino, Jesse does adopt Brock. And during a drug meetup, Merle is talking bad about his kid's show, right? AKA Brock's favorite show. And then Jesse points a gun at Merle and he says, "I'm gonna kill you, B-word." And you know, like, if that does not describe Jesse, I don't know what else does, right? And it just perfectly fits his character. And of course, he does say the B-word so many times. So yeah, this is another connection to Breaking Bad and The Walking Dead, which I thought is really cool because you have Daryl and Merle, specifically Daryl, right, the most popular character in The Walking Dead, meeting Jesse, right, the icon of Breaking Bad, one of the icons in Breaking Bad, of course. And yeah, it's really cool that they met up with Jesse to buy the blue sky drug. And also another piece of evidence I want to mention is a moment in Fear the Walking Dead. And now in specific, in Fear the Walking Dead Season 3, Episode 10, we do see Madison and Taka walking through a market. And we do hear in the background the Heisenberg song playing in the back. And of course, back then it was probably just like a fun little nod to Breaking Bad. And of course, because these are AMC shows at the end of the day, right, we have to keep that in mind. So it doesn't mean that everything has to be connected, and they could just be little nods because AMC's two giant shows or two giant franchises are The Walking Dead and Breaking Bad. So it makes sense to have little nods and teases to these shows. But I thought it was pretty cool that in the market they even played the Heisenberg song, which does add fuel to the fire for this theory. And with them making nods in the main Walking Dead show, specifically with Daryl and Merle, and then showing off the market and playing the song in the back, I think that it's a really cool way to connect these two shows, and just to have Heisenberg be this legend among people. And if the whole theory of the blue sky causing the zombie outbreak is true, then it really does make it a weird situation that they're playing the song of the man who created the zombie virus. And now a lot of people may be wondering that, oh yeah, no actor has been in both The Walking Dead and Breaking Bad, which could be a good thing for this theory, but it also could be a bad thing for this theory. But then I remembered that in Better Call Saul, Stephen Ogg does make an appearance, and he is Mr. X, or the Disappearer, and he is working with Mike, right? He's like one of those hitmen type of people, and his personality in Better Call Saul, and just the way that he acts and being such a douche, it does fit Simon very well, and it is not out of the realm of possibility that this person turns out being Simon in The Walking Dead, and just the way that Simon acts in The Walking Dead, being so immoral and stuff like that. I think that fits Simon's character very perfectly. And also Tobin does appear as well in Breaking Bad, but if you go through every little piece of evidence and every little moment, then of course the theory does have a lot of loose ends, but I thought that Simon was a very cool connection to Mr. X. And also, I just wanted to add upon that whole theory of the blue sky causing the zombie apocalypse. And now, one big plot point in Breaking Bad is that Walter and Jesse did try mixing ricin with their product to poison Tuco. And Walter does describe ricin poisoning as a person just getting a normal cold or sickness and then dying days later. And as we all know, in The Walking Dead, the Walker virus works like this, where if you get bit, it starts with cold, fevers, and then chills, and then death. So this does add on to the theory that maybe the blue sky got contaminated with something, right? We don't know what it got contaminated with, but if it got contaminated with some sort of virus or bacteria, that could have caused the zombie apocalypse. And now, of course, that does not explain how the Walker virus is in the air and everybody's going to turn into walkers, right? And the main explanation there is that maybe the government created the zombie virus, and then they used it as sort of a bioweapon and let it off into the air, right? That is the most logical explanation. But I thought it was cool that maybe it could work like ricin, where if it goes into your bloodstream, it's a slow process, but then the person does eventually die. And of course, we do see in The Walking Dead that if you have a cut and if some walker blood goes inside of you, it kind of does start the symptoms and you turn. But yeah, it would have been really cool if they had more nods to Breaking Bad in the Walking Dead universe. For example, in World Beyond or The Ones Who Live, maybe the CRM could have been experimenting with the blue sky, and they probably found some sort of remnants of the Walker virus in the blue sky. And as we all know, the CRM are doing experiments to look for a cure. So it'd be pretty cool if they had patients and test subjects trying out the blue sky, which have some sort of trace to the Walker virus, and them turning into walkers. So then they come up with the conclusion that this is the thing that caused the zombie outbreak, and they could probably see what it got contaminated with, and they could find the source of the problem. And it would have been cool to see more Walking Dead and Breaking Bad connections throughout the Walking Dead universe. For example, let's just say Jesse showed up in World Beyond or The Ones Who Live as part of the CRM. I think that would have been cool as well. But as we all know, like how I mentioned before as well, the timelines don't match up, and just everything about this theory is very messy. But if they really want to connect it, they could have found some way to connect it. And especially back when The Walking Dead was going through season 4 and season 5, I think they did have some sort of plan to connect these two universes. And that's because during that time, right, like in season 4 of The Walking Dead and stuff like that, that's when The Walking Dead really peaked. And The Walking Dead and Breaking Bad are AMC's biggest franchises, and especially back then when both of them were very, very popular, I think they did have some sort of plan to connect it with all these nods and Easter eggs. But now I don't see that as a possibility, and that's because of how out of hand did the Walking Dead universe go, and just with all these spin-offs and just more explanations about the Walker virus and it being originated from France, I think that there's no way to connect these two franchises, and like how I mentioned before, Better Call Saul's timeline really does throw a big wrench in it, and the word zombie not being used in The Walking Dead, but in Breaking Bad they did mention the name zombie, and just a lot of plot holes and plot details, and of course the timeline being a huge thing where Walter dies in September and the zombie outbreak in The Walking Dead started in August. So yeah, even that's another huge plot hole, but this whole video was just for fun and it was just fan fiction. But it would be really cool if they did more Breaking Bad nods in the future of The Walking Dead. But yeah, that's it for today's video. I'd like to ask you all to like, share, and subscribe. And again, thank you guys so much for the growth. Thank you guys so much for the support. I really, really appreciate it. And I would like to ask you all to like this video as much as you guys can. It helps a ton. But yeah, other than that, thank you guys so much for watching.